Globalisation is a topic that comes up all of the time. What would you say is the driving factor behind globalisation, and how does it affect people?
Well, it's basically making everything interest at big banks like Goldman Sachs and sort of various other sort of big players. Soros, we might get one or two other sort of major oligarchs sort of wanting to sort of control absolutely everything that goes on everywhere in the world. But,
so do you think we are living in an oligarchy?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
And who would you say sits at the top of that pyramid?
I don't think there is actually anybody in sort of overall command of it. I mean, you get sort of conspiracy theories saying it's Prince Philip, but I just don't wear that.
So maybe it's a group of people who have high financial interests.
But everybody sort of starts talking about Masons. Well, I can tell you from long experience, I'd rather work for a Mason than a Catholic. I think it's basically a Catholic conspiracy that's sort of overtaking everything. But UK is definitely sort of moving back into 18th century as far as sort of basic rights and everything else is concerned.
So what would you say the future holds for UK politics?
Somebody's got to come forward with an alternative, a viable alternative that everybody can sort of benefit from. But I don't think at the moment anybody's sort of willing to hear that. We've had Labour for 13 years and we've got rid of them. Let's give the Tories a chance to sort it out, and hope that they will do, but they're not gonna do. It's not gonna happen. So what happens at the next election? Politics, as far as the UK is concerned, is wide open.
There are a number of underground movements that are becoming more popular, which advocate a resource-based economy. What's your opinion on this type of?
Yeah, but they're all elitist-based sort of ideologies that sort of have this sort of small group of people living the high life, and sort of what happens to everybody else? Do we forget about everybody else?
So it's a continuation of what we have, basically.
Yeah.
And see it as a continuation.
Yeah.
It's clear that throughout the years you've been a fierce campaigner against traffic calming. Now, to your average Joe on the street, this might not seem like such a big deal, it might seem insignificant, just a minor nuisance. Could you explain why you feel traffic calming is such a significant and maybe even destructive development?
Well, it doubles pollution for a start, and that's what sort of first sort of got me to it. And then I sort of continued thinking on that line. You sort of explored various theories, and then you sort of come across other things, and then it sort of became apparent that they were using it to obstruct alternatives to any future toll roads, because they were sort of talking about toll roads like sort of right through from 1997, even before that, Tories were on about it. And so that was my next sort of angle, but more recently it's become pretty clear, and I've been backed up by a video that this future trust or something, I forgot exactly what they're called, made a cartoon video of the future, and it mentions ghettos, and it would appear that traffic calming is the groundwork for said ghettos.
So if you believe that traffic calming is to a certain extent ghettoisation, and the traffic calming actually increases pollution, why would you say the environmentalists are so in favour of it?
If you strip back all the gloss from the Green Party, and Caroline Lucas sort of looks nice and everybody thinks, oh, she's a nice girl, we'll vote for her, if you strip all that away, the actual sort of ideology behind it all, especially this CO2 climate scam, the fuel taxes, stuff like that. If you're voting Green, you might think you're being a socialist, but you're actually voting for top-rate fascists.
So it's beyond communism into the realm.
Oh yeah. It's completely off end of scale, and it's not left or right. So you can't attack it from left or right. You've got to attack it direct, head on. You can't sort of pussyfoot around.
Do you think that in yours or my own lifetime we will see personal carbon budgets dished out by the state?
Probably not, because we're going to have another few cold winters and it's going to make them look exceedingly silly, and I wouldn't like to sort of think that anybody, I mean Tories would never do it. I mean, David Miliband were talking about it. If you do it properly, I don't really have that big an ideological problem with it. The only trouble is it won't be done properly. What you've got to do is give everybody an average number of carbon credits, which will include all these sort of fat cats flying around in big jets and stuff like that, to sort of put it up. And then giving you a carbon credit card that dies after it's a year old. You know, it only lasts a year, you have to keep getting a new one. If they did that, it would actually stand a chance of working on allowing people to sort of maintain sort of the sort of key basic human fundamental rights to be warm, dry and have a full belly. And if you start infringing on that, which is where, you know, they're going at the moment, it's time for a revolution.
Okay, you mentioned the word revolution there. In what sense and respect do you use the term revolution?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely not referring to any sort of form of civil war, virtual or otherwise. That would be a complete disaster, and it would appear that certain sort of elements connected with BNP are sort of doing their sort of level best to get a civil war going between them and sort of Muslim community as an whole. The problem is that if they're going to defeat these people that's controlling us now, we all need to act together, not leave anybody out. Everybody has to be it has to be inclusive.
Would you say immigration has happened in the scale it has in the last 20 years or so to facilitate this conflict between races?
Yeah, well, I think it would have been all right if, if you go back to the 1980s, you used to go around and they all spoke with local accent, and if you're on form, you couldn't tell what colour they were. You know, they were like sort of all the same. Now, a lot of these people in their 20s coming through don't even have English as their first language, never mind about an accent. So that sort of sets you apart from your local community for a start, you know, which isn't.
So segregation really in community is not a good thing?
I suppose it is if you're sort of planning to sort of lock them up. I mean, they're all sort of neatly sort of arranged around sort of various towns in areas, and to sort of enclose them into sort of Warsaw-style ghettos. It'd be fairly easy, and all they need to do is sort of let another sort of 7 or whatever it were happen, and you know, you'll have people seriously thinking about things like that.
Do you think that's something we need to consider for the future that could possibly happen?
Yeah, well, I think there's a pretty good chance that all sort of low-income sectors will eventually get sort of walled in and sort of forgot about, while we just get a few sort of elites and a few sort of, you know, probably sort of well-paid but still basically slaves working for them.
So a 1984 type scenario?
Not really. I don't think anybody's sort of hit nail on the head as to what it'll actually sort of then end up being like. But
well, none of us have a crystal ball after all.
Oh no! You can't say for definite. But that's, you know, if you sort of look at the trend, rich people at the moment are sort of building themselves into sort of gated communities, aren't they? And to sort of escape all the sort of. Well, in the US it'll be sort of blacks out there, you know, like sort of unemployed blacks. I know from Facebook friends a sort of big problem, sort of creating hassle. But no, I think that's what they were sort of planning all along. You know, they were like, sort of like you said earlier to me, it might have been off camera, but it's like that in case more than they were actually going to do it, and I think they've sort of realised now, because they've sort of abandoned traffic calming as such, and gone for just putting a 20 mile an hour speed limit sign up, which I think is a really bad thing, because you're going to end up with a load of sort of permanent head injury, crippled sort of kids to look after that would have died at the moment. I know it sounds harsh, but nobody's willing to look after you these days. Let's face it, once your parents are gone, that's it, you've had it. It's not fair on them. It's like premature babies, saving 23-week babies, sort of getting 90% disabled rate, sort of severe disability. On telly last week, there were a young lass on, probably looked about 18 or something like that, who sort of been a premature baby and saying, more or less saying, look, why did you do this to me? Why do I have to live like this? Just to sort of satisfy a sort of theoretical figure so you can prove that everybody's going to live till they're 100, which is basically what it's about.
So why do you think this is happening? Do you think somebody's making some money somewhere?
Well, it's in theory, it's to get you to buy a private pension. And, well, they've got this nest thing hiding round the corner where you and your employer I think your employer has to pay 12% into it, but you have to think it's 3% into the weekly thing, which is going to sort of come out of your way. I mean, most people can't afford to lose that anyway, and they're going to be forced to put it into the stock market, which means whenever it is you get to retirement age, which is going up all the time, it's sort of creeping up towards 70, but you don't get unless you live to 70. Well, you've got no chance if you're in a sort of manual job or a manual sort of physical job that are sort of lasting until then. You'll be gone before that, because everybody's overweight now, so they're not going to live as long anyway.
So what do you suspect the future holds for these people that will be expected to work till 70 who can't?
That's the whole thing. They've dismantled the sort of incapacity benefit system. I mean, if you're on it long term anyway, it should be the equivalent of the old age pension, which only yesterday they were sort of claiming should be 140 quid a week, sort of flat rate for everybody. You only get 100 quid a week if you're on incapacity, then you might get a bit more in DLA and this, that and something else, but not everybody gets that. So basically the sort of trying to sort of freeze and starve you to death, sort of before you get anywhere near your pension. If you get ill, that's it. You're finished, and it's means tested, so you can't save money up for yourself.
So is this what you would describe, we touched on it earlier, corporate ethnic cleansing, is this what you would describe as corporate ethnic cleansing?
Well, a prime example is what's going on in Oakhampton at the moment. Last month, a dessert factory made 200 and odd redundant. Now, Dairy says it's moving to Bridgewater, which I mean is quite sensible from a sort of commercial point of view, theoretically expanding, but I mean they've probably gone because dessert firm went, because you'll probably end up dessert firm taking a lot of milk off them. And then there's this bit of a chocolate factory that's gone wall up and all, but they would have benefited from other two places for transport, because they could have got an odd pallet off there or something, off somebody going to other two places, and now it doesn't happen anymore. So what we're going to do.
Join us in part 5, where we will be discussing the emerging energy crisis.